Hello and welcome to this beginner's guide series to graphic design. From what graphic design is, skills to be a graphic designer, design theory, education you need, equipment you need, to the graphic design portfolio and interview advice. This series is for anyone at any level, so if you're interested in graphic design and consider becoming a graphic designer, then join me as I discuss a series of graphic design topics. Now, graphic design is not simply about making things look good. In graphic design, there are rules and guidelines that can be considered. These rules and guidelines are called the principles of design, and these are what typically separate good design from bad design. These principles all have a relationship between each other and appear in every well-designed piece of work you see. A good grasp of design theory will mean there is always substance behind your work. The key principles of design are contrast, hierarchy, alignment, balance, proximity, repetition, simplicity, and function. Whatever work you produce, be it for a magazine, a poster, a website, or advertisement, the principles of design can be considered. A good designer keeps these principles and guidelines in their toolkit and will consciously use them to develop their ideas. In this video, I'm going to discuss the 8th key design principle and discuss function as a design principle in graphic design. So function is the consideration of the main objective for a piece of graphic work and how well a design is explored and executed to meet that end. The ultimate goal of any graphic design is to communicate and make an impression, but what's equally important is that the right impression is made and the intended outcome is achieved. Earlier in this series, I said that I believe graphic design is the unity of two opposing forces: artistic expression and practical application, design theory. As a creative graphic designer, these two forces will always be at odds with each other in your mind. When you can harness these two forces together in harmony, then you can create great visual communication. When we create a piece of graphic design, more often than not, there will be a specific requirement that will have to be fulfilled. Depending on the complexity of the task, there could be one or many requirements. Now, in design, one typically gets that requirement in the form of a brief from a client, either written or verbally. Before a designer starts any piece of work, there is key information that will need to be understood. This will ensure that a designer is put in the best position to produce the right creative solution. A good and thorough brief will include at least 3 key things: an overview, requirements, and an intended outcome. The overview should introduce the idea of the project and what exactly the design is intended for. The overview should clearly highlight the target audience the client wishes to address with any other relevant information which may be of importance. The requirements will outline exactly what will be needed creatively across print and digital media. This could be anything from a printed poster, a brochure, to a website. The intended outcome should clearly state what the client hopes to achieve with the graphic work, how it wants people to respond to the work, and how it wants people to think, feel, or act. A brief may go as far as to suggest what is required visually, a particular style or colour scheme to be used, or a typeface. A brief may be creatively limiting or open to exploration. So a brief will set out all the challenges and boundaries a designer will have to deal with in order to create the right creative solution. It will be the details outlined in the brief that will influence the creative solution. Now, if a piece of design fails to deliver on what the brief asks, then it fails in its function. This is where form versus function often comes into play. For beginners, it is easily assumed that simplistic, practical design might not be good or interesting. So form, how good something looks, may be seen as a priority. However, in professional design, it is understood that form follows function. That priority should always be given to function over form, how good something looks. During research, development, and design, one must always take into account the function of the design. One of the most important things you can do is understand your audience and the required goal. Considering language, colour, and layout will enable you to communicate well and engage with a particular audience to encourage the intended result. As a rule, you can always ask yourself the question, why? Why am I using that colour? Why am I using that typeface? Why am I arranging my elements in this way? Why am I using these shapes, photos, and so on? Is it adding anything to the piece of design, or is it distracting, misleading, thus taking away? Always ask yourself why, and have a good rationale for each decision. In design, one should always try and avoid the appearance of having made arbitrary decisions. If noticeable, this can devalue a piece of work. However limited a brief, or however creative a brief, whatever is done, remember to keep in mind the function and be sure it delivers on its function. A good designer will always strive to achieve a harmony in beauty and function. So that is the 8th key design principle in graphic design. When you look at design, ask yourself, how well does it function? Does it get across the intended message? Could it be more striking? How clear is the message, and how clear is the design? Is there anything you would do to change the design? And what impression does it make on you? Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button on my Facebook page. If you'd like to see more videos like this in future, hit the subscribe button. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Tastytudes. So up until now, I have been discussing design theory and the essential things to know about graphic design. Now it's time to move into section 2. Now, if you're considering a career in graphic design and wonder if it's right for you, in the next section, I'll be answering a bunch of key questions. So for the first video in section 2, I'm going to answer the question, why do graphic design? Where I'll be discussing some pros and cons. So see you in the next video.